Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
So we'll start by going around and saying our names. I'm David.
Rod.
Justin.
Carl.
George.
Manuel.
Larry.
Scott. Darren. Todd. Michael.
Edmund.
Tommy.
Paul.
Frank.
Louis.
Joe.
Paul.
Mark.
Bill. Peter.
Bob.
Liz. Bill.
Art.
Dennis.
Christopher.
Paul. Dean.
Jack.
Ollie.
Jay.
Max.
Ed.
Steve.
Robert.
Scott.
Evis.
Dave. Robin.
Greg.
Barry.
Ray.
Sujit.
Michael.
Great. Okay. And
Hey, I'm Robina.
Robina. Of course, I was about to introduce you.
I know, I'm just joking.
Great. Yes, our speaker today is Robina Courtin, Venerable Robina Courtin. She has been a Tibetan Buddhist nun since taking orders, I guess you call them, in 1978. 1978. And she's been working for the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. She was first the directing editor of their publication house, I guess, and then also editor of the Mandala magazine. And she's also now director of the Prison Project, which helps thousands of prisoners in the United States and Australia with their Buddhist practice. And so with that, please welcome. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. I think I was here, wasn't it, 5 years ago? I couldn't believe. I thought it was last year, but we all agreed time goes fast.
We were here 5 years ago.
I can't believe.
5 years ago.
I know, it's amazing. Yes, 5 years. I thought it was last year or 2 years max. Amazing. So, over my double espresso this morning with Paul and Ali, we were thinking maybe we could talk about the mind and the kind of look into a little bit about the difference between what we can simply say are the kind of destructive, unhappy emotions and the positive, constructive emotions, because I think often we get them a bit mixed up. But first, let's just put it in some kind of context. One of the really nice packagings of Buddha's teachings is called the three trainings, or the three higher trainings. And the third one is finally the point, like the bottom line, which is called wisdom. And we'll talk about that, but essentially it means, the state of mind that is now in sync with the way the universe is. Buddha would say that right now there's this big division between the way we see things, the way we experience things, and how things actually are. I mean, as we know as Buddhists, this is kind of Buddha's deal, how he talks. And so the final thing, the accomplishment, is the accomplishment of this extraordinary level of mind, the Buddha would say we all innately possess the potential to achieve, which brings with it, like this clarity, this wisdom that sees everything as it is, but also the byproduct of our own contentment, our own fulfillment, our own joy, our own happiness, whatever you like. So in order to get this, we need what's called single-pointed concentration, shamatha, shine in Tibetan. Calm abiding, they use the term in English. But it's essentially a state of mind that we don't even posit as existing in all the Western models of the mind. It's this extraordinarily subtle, refined level of mind, of consciousness, that we can access through utilizing Buddha's very marvelous, sophisticated psychological techniques called meditation, that enable us to actually get that wisdom, But in order to get that, we need the first one, which is called morality. So what's morality? Well, simply speaking, in Buddhist terms, I mean, this is the Buddhist way of articulating it. You could say morality is, actions, or karma, the word means action, of body, speech and mind. Or as I noticed they said in the little marriage ceremony of Charles and Camilla yesterday, did you watch? It was very nice. In there, it said that they were confessing their naughty actions. Remember that nice prayer they said? And as the priest said, any the wrong, whatever they said, sins of what do they say? They say it in the Christian thing of thought, word, and deed. I remember from being a Catholic, that's how they say. So Buddha's the same. He talks about actions of body, speech, and mind. It means the same. So morality is when we are doing actions of body, speech, and mind that are essentially non-harmful to others. That's almost you could say that's a simple way of defining the most basic level, even a passive level of morality, which is already a marvellous level of morality. If the whole world refrained from doing actions of body, speech, and mind that harmed others, I mean, what a marvellous world it would be. Then, of course, you could add to that level of morality if you look at the from the Mahayana point of view, the Buddha says that a bird needs two wings. We've got the wisdom wing, which is all the work we would do on the mind to, in this one packaging, these three trainings, to develop that wisdom, to remove all the obscurations from the mind. Then the other wing is the compassion wing, which is, from the morality, from the point of view of the wisdom wing, is this refraining from harming others with body, speech and mind, which is what morality would mean. Then the proactive level of morality is actually doing positive actions of body, speech and mind that benefit others. So these are two ways of talking about morality. But let's look at even the most basic level, which is sort of like junior school, The active one of benefiting is a bit like high school. We've got to get to junior school first. So let's look at this one of morality. Because let's face it, most of us aren't probably going in this life be prepared or qualified to go off to the mountains to get, single point of concentration in order to realise wisdom, to realise emptiness. Probably most in this life won't do that. And most of us, therefore, are very occupied at the level of the practice of morality, which itself is already marvellous level. It's like the essential daily life of being a Buddhist, Or at least the daily life of being a decent human being, and maybe in our case the tools we use are Buddha's tools. So let's look at morality. Well, one way of saying it, the very first level, like, before junior school even, you could say the first level of practicing morality is the morality of refraining from harming with our body and speech, with the actions and deeds, words and deeds. Because let's face it, that's what impacts on others, isn't it? What, the interface between others is our body and our speech. So there's a saying among some of the Tibetan practitioners, they say, when you're with others, you watch your body and your speech. And when you're on your own, you can watch your mind. So as we all know, Buddha would say that everything comes from the mind. Everything emanates from the mind, I mean, if I, punch him in the nose, we kind of can deduce there must be something in my mind that's expressing that punch. I mean, I wouldn't be feeling blissful in my mind thinking, isn't he a marvellous person and how I love him, and then go punch. The fist expresses what's in the mind. So it's fairly obvious. But I think because in our Western culture we're not used to looking at the mind. We don't even pay any credibility. We don't give any credibility to the mind. We say, oh, it's only the mind, as if somehow that's nothing. It's only actions that count. So I think one of our main problems, I think in the West about our mind is that we don't even know how to see what's happening inside there, But nevertheless, the very first level of practice, before we begin the marvellous job of being able to notice what's going on in our mind and learn to slowly develop its extraordinary potential, which is the real heart job of a Buddhist, we need to look at the body and speech one. So I wanted to just to say that, but I want to talk about the mind. Because let's face it, if the body and speech, and I can see in my own life, anger, for example, there's a fairly volatile emotion that most of us have to one degree or another. And I can see since a little girl, that that it was so explosive, it was coming from here, the mind. But then because it was so explosive and so spontaneous, my body and speech were, doing their thing all the time. So until I could begin to control my body and speech, like zip my lip and keep my hands to myself, no way did I have any opportunity to really notice the mind. Or forget about noticing it, but no way did I have an opportunity to try and change it. It's impossible, So the heart job, I think, of being a Buddhist is true. You can say it's the body and speech one. This is major. But the heart job is the mind. That's, I think, the real distinctive characteristics of Buddha, Buddha's practices, Buddha's teachings, is his, in my words, his own kind of his marvelous, very sophisticated understanding of the mind. So maybe just to refresh us, let's look at what the mind is and what the mind is not. So, okay, as you know, obviously I'm talking from from my training in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is the Mahayana, and which comes from the great monastic university tradition in India, the great in Nalanda Monastery. So, as you know, probably one of the emphasis in many of the traditions in Tibet is this monastic university tradition, where they study very deeply and extensively the philosophy and the psychology and the metaphysics that have developed over the centuries as commentaries on the Buddha's teachings. So just personally, I find that a very helpful approach as a basis for my practice, as a basis for the core practice of working on my mind. So let's look at so from this perspective, let's look at what the mind is. I know in all the different traditions there are many different discussions about this. So given that you might be a Zen or something else, this is from the way they talk in the monastic university tradition in Tibet, coming from the Mahayana tradition in India. So, okay, in this tradition, mind is used virtually synonymously with the word consciousness, which I think already from our Western perspective gives it a very nice flavour. It shows that it's something more than merely the brain or the intellect, which is how we tend to use the word in the West. So that's the first thing. Secondly, and this is, it's really crucial for us if we really want to see what Buddha's saying, that mind is not physical. Mind is not your brain. Anger is not, depression, anger, these things, they can be hugely impacted, which we can see from our experiences, by what goes on in the body. We all know that if you go to the doctor and you say you've got depression, it gives you your serotonin, it calms the chemicals down, or whatever they say the imbalance is, and then you feel less depressed. So we can easily deduce from this, which is what the Western models of the mind do, that therefore depression is a chemical imbalance. But the Buddha's way of saying it would be that the depression is in the mind. It's the mind, and we'll look at it. It's a series. It's not physical, but it's obviously affected by the body, because the body and mind work very interdependently. Obviously, intimately interconnected. So, if you were to go to your Tibetan doctor, it'd be the same thing, or your Chinese doctor. They'd feel your pulses. They'd see your wind energies are berserk. So they give you some herbal pills which you take, and over time it would calm the berserk wind energies down, which would then impact on your mind and make you less anxious. So mind and body are, in Buddhist terms, definitely are not the same entity, but clearly are interdependent, And in one sense, certainly at the grosser level of the way the mind works, and this is again using a little kind of one approach from this tradition, that we've got, at the grosser level of consciousness, which is the only level we usually function at, which is the conceptual and the sensory, we can see that body and mind are inseparable. Just like, you can say the main cause of the apple tree is the apple seed, but you can hold an apple seed up here for 22 years. Well, honey, you won't get an apple tree. You understand my point? You need the earth and the water and the soil, but you would never make the mistake of thinking that, therefore the apple seed is the earth, is the soil, the only thing that's necessary, or that the water and the sun are the apple seed. They're not, You've got to have the seed there. So the Buddhist one is, the mind is like the seed. The mind is the main thing. The mind is the source. But at the gross level, it functions interdependently, or on the basis of the body, the physical world, environment, and so on and so forth. So this is a crucial point. For us Buddhists, the experiential implication of this is, yes, the world might be a horrible place, and yes, people are mean to me, and yes, this good thing happens, but that's not the main cause. And yes, the chemicals in my body are out of balance, but that's not the main thing. I've got to, that's a strong one. But the key one is my own mind. Let's investigate that. What is the depression? What's going on in here? What is the anger? What is the loneliness? What is the jealousy? What is it? Let's look at it, not just the physical thing. That's crucial, So take your serotonin, no problem. But then just take it to allow your chemicals to calm down, so now you can do the job of working on your mind. This is the deal, So in other words, the implication of Buddha's assertion that mind isn't physical, which you can sort of go off into and look at it very deeply in the philosophical point of view, it's not meant to be just something, the implication is experiential. It's not just meant, it is an interesting concept, but it's not just meant to be some interesting concept that you think about and learn and how interesting. You've got to see the implication of it. And that's quite empowering when we can really see that, The other crucial point in Buddhism, which is fundamental to Buddha, for which we mightn't give too much thought to, and which again, and it's again the experiential implication of which that really is the point, is that mind does not come from someone else. Oh no, okay, first that mind or consciousness, these are words that don't refer just to the intellect. You know, most Tibetans, if you say the mind, they'll point here, to the heart, you know. So what is meant by mind here, using the broad view in Buddhism, mind or consciousness is the words that are used to refer to the entire spectrum of our inner experiences. Thoughts, intellect, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, intuition, instinct, the whole deal. That's mind. But it's used in a more sort of tasty way, this word, mind, It's like your experiences themselves. It's a very subjective kind of use of the word. So the other crucial point, and again what I'm saying is the implications of this other point, is that mind doesn't come from anyone else. If you're a Christian or a Muslim, or if you're a materialist, which most of us would be, the latter, let's say, we would all agree on one thing actually, which is interesting, that someone else created us. So if you're a materialist, Mummy and Daddy created you, and if you're a Christian or a Muslim, well, God created you. Well, Buddha doesn't say this. He says that you don't come, your mind does not come from anyone else, a superior being or your, inferior mum and dad. Your body, sure thing, your mother and father gave you a body, how kind. That's fairly evident. The egg and sperm come together, in your mummy's womb or in a petri dish, however we were conceived. I mean, probably most of us conceive the old-fashioned way. So what the Buddhist deal is, the Christian one would be, let's say, at the time of conception in your mother's womb, God puts a soul there. If you're a materialist, you are only the egg and sperm. But if you're a Buddhist, the Buddha's view, and this is where where he's distinctly different, he would say this consciousness, this mind, this, and they often use the term mental continuum, or basically it's like a continuity of mental moments. And if we all had perfect memory, we know we would trace back our thoughts and feelings and emotions, this river of mental moments, inexorably back to the first moment, wouldn't we, at conception, when Robina began. So what caused Robina to begin, in other words, what caused that egg and sperm to come together, not just go down the toilet with the rest, was the entry into that egg and sperm of a subtler level of the same continuity of consciousness. In other words, if you trace back the egg and sperm, you'd end up back in mummy's and daddy's bodies. But if you trace back your consciousness, all your thoughts, feelings, emotions, like as this river of mental moments, you'd go back to the previous moment before conception. Your consciousness was there. Clearly not at the same gross level, because his body wasn't there then, functioning at the grosser level. One has subtler, more refined levels of consciousness. So the Buddhist deal is that this consciousness is your own. It doesn't come from mum and dad. It doesn't come from God, Which and the teachings in it, are really extensive. The teachings on karma and on the consciousness and what its nature is and so on are quite extensive. You can go into them very deeply. But again, the real point here from this, for me, which is most empowering, which is what gives us the power to know we can change our minds, is that my mind is mine. My anger is mine. My jealousy is mine. My depression is mine. Not even my body's. Doesn't come directly from the body. Does not come directly from mum and dad or God or someone else. This is the real point. And of course, as we all know in our lives, this is the view we all instinctively hold. I didn't ask to get born. Excuse me. That's how we feel, isn't it? It's not my fault. How dare my mother and father decide to make me and plonk me in this lousy world? You see my point? I mean, it's quite an interesting concept. So, when I learned my Catholic catechism, well, who made me? Well, God made me. But if I got a Buddhist catechism, Buddha's saying, well, honey, I'm sorry, you made you, Which is the one of the consciousness and the law that determines the way that consciousness or that mind experiences things from moment to moment. This is just Buddha's deal, This is Buddha's creative principle. The law that determines it is this law of karma. This is the thing. So we can talk about karma, but I think let's talk about the mind, okay, and experientially, these psychological states that we all think of when we think of our mind, So again, an interesting context for this is another package of Buddha's teachings called the Four Noble Truths. And the third one, is Buddha's assertion that we can be free of suffering. As we know, the Four Noble Truths are talked about in the context of suffering. And so the third one is Buddha's this extraordinary, actually very radical assertion that every living being innately has the potential to be free of suffering. But another way of saying that is to be full of happiness. I mean, free from suffering means full of happiness. We might walk around saying, oh, I want to be free from suffering. It sounds a bit abstract. But hey, I want to be happy, please. This we can all say. You know. And so again, if I'm a Christian, yes, happiness is possible, but necessarily only when you go to heaven with God. If we're a materialist, it's a kind of bit of a conflict for us. On the one hand, we never stop every second trying to get happy. Every action of body, speech, and mind that we have is determined by our, is determined by our wish to be happy. Everything we do is that, and to be free of suffering. But on the other hand, if we're materialists, we'll look cynically at the world and say, oh, come on, forget about it. Happiness is not possible. But we never stop trying. So it's kind of a conflict. So if we're a Buddhist, Buddha says, sure, happiness is possible. But he's not saying it's necessarily when you die. It's not saying, like Christians do, that it's necessarily that you can't, when you are beyond this body. Buddha would say mind is mind is mind, whether it's in this body or out of this body. And we have the capability, using Buddha's techniques, especially the meditation techniques and the practice of morality, to fundamentally change our mind, remove the causes of suffering from our mind, develop the causes of happiness within our mind, to develop it to its amazing potential. The word nirvana just means that, It's not heaven. It's not some kind of lovely place, or boring place, probably, that we've got to give up sort of sex, drugs and rock and roll in delicious samsara, which is how we think in our fundamentalist way, kind of we want to be nice Buddhists, but we don't really want to give up samsara because we think of it as all where the happiness is, and nirvana is this boring place. But actually it's not like that, clearly. Nirvana is a word, it's really using it simply, that is a word that refers to the mind of the person who's fully developed all this extraordinary potential that we all possess innately, and remove completely all the pollution, all the suffering. This is how Buddha's talking. So, the word psychology wasn't coined back then, but more than anything, it's truly not a joke to say that Buddha is this amazing psychologist. Buddha's dealing with nothing other than the mind, So, okay, if it is true then, as Buddha would assert, that we all got the potential to be free of suffering, to be full of happiness, to develop to perfection, you could say this. Then we ought, and we think, well, that's nice, I want that, please. Then we ought to know what it is that prevents us from having it even right now. So that's the first noble truth. Hey, there is suffering. And then, so we need to know what suffering is and identify it very exactly, precisely, I think we have it just, on this. But the precision and clarity and depth of analysis that we all know that we need to employ to investigate the meaning of microphones and tables and how to, floors and architecture and science is exactly the precision and clarity and depth of analysis that Buddha would demand we use to understand the mind. And I think when we get into spiritual terms, and again, this is the kind of a dualistic world we live in, we get all kind of cosmic and we lose our common sense, We think it's all kind of trippy and wow and far out and beyond. But really, Buddha's not like that. I mean, there's all the religious packaging. I mean, look at us, But really, this scientific approach that we think we invented in the West, we materialists, is really exactly the approach that Buddha uses. But it's very hard to see that because we can't see past the kind of religious packaging. But it's really important to do that, So the precision and clarity we need here is to investigate exactly what is suffering. Which we'll do. This is discussing the mind now. The second kind especially is dealing directly with the mind. And then the second noble truth is absolutely fundamental. Because if we use the analogy of water, I better remember I've only got an hour, haven't I? Gosh, I'm coming, okay? Trying to give some background and then I'll get to it. Okay, so what was I saying?
Water.
Okay, thank you very much. The analogy of water, okay? The third noble truth is Buddha saying, hey guys, your water can be free of pollution. So it's as if we've had water for so long, but it's been polluted that we now just think that that's what water is. It's sort of like we know water is H2O, and the pollution is actually an additive, it's separate, and therefore not innate to the water. But it's like our water, our mind has been polluted for so long, we just think, oh, well, this is who I am. Wrong, Buddha says. The nature of mind is innately pure. And another way simply of saying this is the positive qualities are innate within us. They're at the core of our being. And this, again, the implications of this are mind-blowing. Because the way we are now, the way we hold our sense of self, it's like we incorporate all the pollution, we incorporate the misery, we incorporate the suffering, we incorporate all the negative, unhappy qualities into our sense of self, and we think that's who I am. And that's the way the West does it too. I mean, all our models of the mind say this, you know. But Buddha would say, no, they're separate. This is why he says we have the potential to change. If the pollution was innate to the water, how could you ever change it? You could not. You know, we know it's H2O. 2 bits of H, 1 bit of O. But if it were H2O P27 or something for pollution, you know, then of course you can't separate the pollution. It's just what water is. This is an important point. What the mind is, Buddha says, our own mind is innately pure, which simply means psychologically all the positive qualities. So, what is it that prevents us from being this marvellous person that we have the potential to be is the presence in the mind, this is, you know, of the pollution. And so the causes of suffering, the second noble truth, points to this one. There are 2 causes, Buddha says. Karma, past actions, that set us up to have the present suffering. And that's the same reason why we're happy. Past actions set us up now, imprinted in the mind, left in the past, come along, now ripen, and set us up for happiness as well. So the causes of happiness are the same as the causes of suffering. But the trouble is when we think of karma, we often go, why do bad things happen to me? We agonize over it. But we never say, why do good things happen to me? We do not agonize over that. The causes are the same. Past karma and then present states of mind. So in the context of suffering, the second one is what I want to talk about. So this is the second noble truth, causes of suffering. And the second one is called delusions. And this is referring to the unhappy, unproductive, destructive, disturbing emotions. This is the words we'd use. And these are variations of words they use in Tibetan, actually. So let's look at those. Because they are the source of suffering. They're the key to why we suffer. Therefore, if we do have this potential, we ought to be very precise in identifying the causes of this. Because if you can't identify the causes of pollution, you're going to keep having pollution as much as you keep taking it out of your water. You've got to know what causes it, because then you won't do it again. So the key to Buddhist practice, the heart of Buddhist practice in the mind, is implied in this second noble truth. You know, don't just hear these words kind of like, oh, nice religion, yeah, we know the four noble truths, oh yes, it's this and that, and blah, blah, you know. Here it is really tasty, really experiential, because this is the heart of Buddhist practice. This is where we begin to put our money where our mouth is, you know, dealing with the mind. So, okay, this mind of mine, a simple way of saying, of describing the components of the mind is in terms of, it's three. There's no fourth category. Positive states of mind, negative states of mind, neutral states of mind. Let's leave the neutral alone. And then we come down to the positive and the negative. So this is like learning to distinguish between the pure water and the pollution. Right now, they're so mixed. When you look at it, you can't see the difference. So right now with our minds, in our own self, our positive and negative emotions are so mixed together, they're like milk and water. We mostly can't distinguish. Certainly when the mind's fairly quiet. When there's very strong emotions, we can kind of go, oh, duh, you know, there's the jealousy, there's the anger. But even when we do say that, part of the problem is we have very different definitions of those things. So let's look at the Buddha's approach. He makes this clear distinction between positive and negative states of mind. The positive ones, or productive, or beneficial, or appropriate states of mind. He says we need to, you know, recognize and distinguish those from the so-called negative, non-productive, painful, unhappy states of mind. Why? Not any moralistic reason. Buddha's not being moralistic, you know. There's no blame, kind of dualistic blame, victim mode in Buddhism. We all have that deep in the bones of our being. It's just the way ego works, ironically. You know, it's just how we are, but he doesn't talk this way. So we need to distinguish between the positive and the negative emotions, and really precisely, really clearly. Because in our culture, you know, because we bring all this stuff into our persona and say, that's who we are innately, we're all born this way, what can we do? So we kind of throw our hands in the air and think, anger is natural, love is natural, we've all got a bit of both. As long as there's not too much anger, you're an okay human being. That's a bit like saying, well, as long as there's not too much pollution in the water, then it's okay water. No, water can be completely separated from the pollution. Or more precisely, the pollution can be removed completely. That's the radical point that Buddha's making. So it's important to hear this, you know. So that means, if the cause of suffering, one of them is the presence in my own mind of unhappy states of mind, of emotions, that do not come from mummy and daddy, that do not come from God, that are not at the core of my being, and are not mainly coming from the mean person out there who did that thing to me, then it really demands we have to own it ourselves, without guilt, without shame, but with great courage to learn to understand it, on the basis of the wish and the confidence that, hey, I don't need this stuff. I can go beyond it. This is the point, you know. This is the point. This is the way of talking Buddha's whole thing, in down-to-earth, ordinary, you know, present 21st century words. So then what are these negative states of mind? Because they're the cause of my suffering. Well, you could say effectively, from the point of view of the presentation of the Four Noble Truths, effectively the main cause of suffering is called attachment. This word, you know, that we all throw around, everybody uses it, it's a real, we hear it loud and clear when we hear Buddha talking. But oh my goodness, everybody in this room would have a different definition if we asked each of us to write it down now. Because we haven't all been to, you know, attachment school. We've all been to numbers school, and if we all were asked what is 7, if we didn't know the meaning, we'd be embarrassed and we'd be quiet, right? But every one of us in this room would agree on the definition of 7. Because we've all been to this, you know, we all know math is important. But we haven't learned how to define love, attachment, anger. Everybody has a different definition. And we just think, oh, that's cool. But I mean, no wonder we have confusion. You know, if you asked for 7 apples and I gave you 5, we'd be really confused with each other. But if I say I love you and you say you love me and we think we're agreeing, well, excuse me, we've both got a huge agenda, don't we, of what we mean, our own definitions, our own expectations, because of all the baggage we bring to that simple word, you know. And this is where the Buddha is so clear. We need to be clear about these things. So you don't need to agree with Buddha's view. You can decide on Jung or Freud instead if you like. You're the boss, you know. Buddha's not asking us to believe what he says. And for me, on my own experience, this is the benefit of, you know, studying the texts and the teachings and the psychology, because you can get some kind of real ground in what Buddha's meaning by those words. Not just say the words. Oh yeah, I've got to give up attachment, you know. So right now, when we use the word attachment, we mostly use it interchangeably with the word love, with the word happiness, with the word pleasure. So then when we hear Buddha say, sorry guys, you can't be happy unless you get rid of it, we go, oh, I've got to give up my heart, I've got to give up my happiness, as Lama Zopa says. Not true, you know. Love is not attachment. Happiness is not attachment. Pleasure is not attachment. So let's look at what is attachment, and more broadly, what are the characteristics of these unhappy states of mind that we need to recognize in order to become happy, which is what we want. Not to mention, in order to benefit others, which is also what we want. So, okay, one of the characteristics of the unhappy states, of the negative states of mind, and this is indicated by another synonym in Buddhist psychology that they use in Tibetan, is the term simply disturbing emotion. Disturbing emotion. And we mightn't use that word every day. Oh, I've got such a disturbing emotion today. We wouldn't say that. We'd say, I feel terrible, I feel paranoid or something, I feel depressed or whatever. We'd give a name to one of those disturbing emotions. But it's so obvious. One of the characteristics of these unhappy emotions, negative emotions, is that they are disturbing. Well, to whom? Well, to me. You see my point? When I have it, forget about the person I harm with it. But just by looking into my mind, if we're truly honest with ourselves, based on this genuine wish to develop my marvellous potential, not based on any kind of self-hate, I can't help but notice that when I'm angry, I am disturbed. I mean, it is so obvious, you know. But 1, because we're convinced that anger's in my persona just naturally and I can't change it. 2, because I think Mummy made me this way. And 3, anyway, it's your fault. You see my point? And 4, we think it's physical. There are 4 reasons why we think I can't change anger, and why I wouldn't even want to change anger. Because we have all these wrong assumptions. This is what Buddha's saying. Our minds, he says, are riddled with misconceptions, even simply about where the anger comes from. 1, it's physical. 2, Mummy did it. 3, it's my natural state. And 4, it's your fault. Do you see my point here? They will prevent us from wanting to even look at the anger. Yeah, I know it's disturbed, but hey, you punched me. Do you see my point here? So we're obsessed with you better change. Then I'm going to feel better. So everything we do, all the assumptions we have now in our ordinary Western culture, are removing us from even wanting to look at our anger. And then if we do, we feel guilty. So it's like whatever we do, we're kind of ridiculous, you know. So using Buddha's way of seeing, the thing we need to learn to do is learn, and this is where these meditation techniques come in extremely helpful. If for no other reason to sit there attempting to watch your breath, and all you can see is your misery and all the chatter and the rubbish and the jealousy and the depression. You understand my point? It's vivid and clear, isn't it? But we need to see it. We need to observe it, you know. If you can't locate the cancer, how can you heal it? So we have to know not only that I'm angry, because we only see it when it's at its grossest level, when it's shouting loud, you know, when it's just vomiting out the mouth. We've got to learn to see it, and this is the real distinctive Buddhist kind of skill, is to see, you know, with the techniques of doing simple concentration meditation and doing them really well with kind of real discipline. You're learning to focus the mind, but what you're learning to do is see or hear all these emotional stuff, right? In the beginning, it's just loud noise, isn't it? Like this white noise or black noise. What do they call it? What's the opposite to the one they call white noise? Probably black noise. Anyway, you get my point. The noisy stuff, it's so there all the time, we just hear this blur, like traffic in the freeway from the distance, you understand? But with the techniques of these, you know, concentrating, you slowly start to distinguish the different voices. You hear them. You know, you learn to sort of pick them out and hear them when they're more and more quiet. So right now, because in our culture, we don't have techniques for looking at our mind. Maybe we do a bit more, but when we were kids, I bet we didn't learn. Our mummy didn't teach us how to distinguish anger from this and that, and we'll learn about, darling, and yes, you can change it. It's not your real nature. I mean, if we'd heard this when we were children, we'd be amazing now, right? So we haven't learned to listen. We only know we're angry now when it vomits out the mouth. We only know we're depressed when we can't get out of bed one morning. And then we know we better go off and find some serotonin pretty quick. But, you know, all the Buddha's saying is, hey, we can learn to see our mind from the time we're kids and learn to see our mind well before it gets to the very gross level, the gross emotional level. So this gets us to another... So one characteristic of the unhappy emotions is that they're disturbing to me, which implies that it's painful. I don't want to be disturbed. I don't want to suffer. I can change it. But the other one we learn to see, which gives us a tool to help change, is this other characteristic of the mind, which is very interesting. We don't think like this at all, but let's look at how this is true. And this is indicated by another term in Tibetan, that a synonym for these negative states of mind is the term delusion. Now, if someone accused you of being delusional, you'd be very hurt, right? Isn't it? And if we say, hey, my God, she's so delusional, we know what we mean. We know this person's in la-la land in relation to reality. But it sounds shocking, but really what Buddha is saying is, hey, you're all delusional. It's just a question of degree. And this is not a joke. It's actually exactly correct, according to Buddha's way of seeing the mind. So let's look at that. Let's see how it's true. So, okay. Let's say, you know, I'm as mad as... Let's say I'm angry with... What's your name? Manuel. Okay, Manuel. Let's say Manuel punches me in the nose. You know, and I'm really angry. Right. Oh, I forgot. I lost my point there. Sorry. What was I saying? I'm sorry. What? Delusion. Thank you. God. It really is true. Old age is true, isn't it? Any of you getting old around here, you know you forget things. I do all the time now. I can't believe it. Okay, so delusional. So when I'm mad at Manuel, just check this. I'm shouting and yelling and I'm upset and hurt. And when we think of anger, we think of the emotion. We see all this shouting and yelling, right? That's what we mean by anger. But if you were to tape what I was saying and then write it down, and then when I'm calmed down, I'd look at it, or you'd look at it later, you know. You're not hearing any shouting. You're not hearing emotion. But what you're doing is you're reading words, aren't you? And what am I saying? You did this, how dare you do that, I hate you, I will kill you, it is not my fault. What? You see my point? They're a series of thoughts. They are concepts, right? They're concepts. And when I'm mad at Emmanuel, all the emotion, but the words I'm saying are describing him as this monster, as the cause of all my suffering, and I hate him, I can't stand, all that kind of thing. Now when I calm down later, because he's my friend, I'll be mortified, because I'll realise, what did I do? I was exaggerating. I was exaggerating Manuel's horribleness, you know. So all I'm saying here is that's what delusion is. When you've got an unhappy emotion in the mind, one of the results is that it's disturbing to you. It's very painful. And two is you're not in touch with reality. I mean, yes, he was mean to me, but someone, you know him and he's a nice guy and he's not always mean to me. So when you're angry, you're fixated on that one thing. You're obsessed with that one thing. You're obsessed with that one action. You define the whole of Manuel by that one action. And then you think, that is Manuel. Now this is really what Buddha is saying is ignorance is, the root delusion of all. Ignorance is broadly the way we misconceive things. And this is the characteristic of all these unhappy emotions. They're delusional. They're misconceptions. You know, I mean, look at the world. We're just, you know, again, talking over our coffee. For example, I mean, we call it in this world racism. We call it this one. We call it whatever you guys suffer from. What's the word? What's the ism? Oh,
Homophobia.
Thank you very much. It's an okay, that one. You get my point. Thank you very much. I forgot the word. But you understand my point here. We give labels to all these, and what are they? If you've got a person who is racist, who is homophobic, if you analyse it with Buddha's model of the mind, very strong ignorance, which is very strong anger, vindictiveness, this, that, fear, they're all delusional. They're delusions. Because you know when they're saying you are this and you are that, you're thinking, aren't they talking about me here? I know I'm not like that. Do you understand my point? When I'm accusing, or even if Manuel didn't do anything and I'm accusing him of doing something, he's thinking, excuse me, I'm not like that. I didn't do that, Robina. What is she saying? What is she seeing here? I'm seeing a thing that isn't true, right? Now, you know when someone's saying something to you, or whoever it is, you get my point here, that these unhappy emotions, they're delusional. They're not accurate assessments of what's going on. And that is what Buddha's saying, across the board, you know. So anger is one variation of them. Paranoia, depression, attachment, jealousy, they're all unhappy emotions, and if you look at them carefully, if you do some analysis on them, and we've got to be our own therapists, this is what the Buddha's deal, we've got to really look into, not just see the loud noise, but to go into the character, the structure of the concepts behind the noise, that inform the noise, inform the emotion. This is the way Buddha sees the mind, and we can hear this, you know. So we have to look into this very deeply and learn to see our own delusional states of mind, which are the ones that cause me so much pain, and how they, each of them, how they function. The character of the jealousy, the story that jealousy is saying, the story that anger is saying, the story that attachment is saying. Attachment's the root one, you know. And then it's clear that we know they're suffering. We don't go, oh yes, I was jealous yesterday, it was great. I mean, we know these words refer to the pain, you know. So Buddha's just saying they're not part of your being. They're not at the core of your being, surprisingly. We think they all are. They don't define you. They're real. Oh my gosh, the pollution's real. But it's not at the core of your being. This is the fundamental point. That means gives us great courage to want to investigate them and to learn to slowly change them. Now, when we know they're not just the big loud noise, which is the emotional one, then we know that they're conceptual. They're stories, elaborate stories that Buddha would say we've been telling for countless lives, that we bring with us. We're already brainwashed with our stories from the time we're tiny kids, you know. We brought with us. This is the karmic business. So we've got this, so we need to deconstruct, you know, the mind. Go way beyond the emotions, down to the quieter, more subtle level, to learn to see the construction, the story, the delusional story, which we believe is the truth. And that's the tragedy. It's sort of like one Lama Zopa said, bad enough that we think Manuel is this or that. But the killer is that we believe it's true. Like the homophobic, like the racist, you know. No one can argue with them. They know they are right. You see my point here. But you know it's an elaborate conceptual construction that there's some, for whatever reason, they've made up and they're convinced they're right. That's what Buddha's saying we all do to one degree or another. Okay, all our delusions mightn't be institutionalised, called racist or homophobic, but they're all something ist, you know. We're our own ist. We've all got our own little delusional stuff, right? This is what Buddha's saying. So for our sake, which is the wisdom wing, and for the sake of others, which is the compassion wing, this is our job, you know. And of course the biggest problem is, you know, let's say Manuel did harm me. No one can argue he didn't. You saw it, you all saw it, he punched me, let's say. So the usual logic we have is, of course I'm angry, Manuel punched me. Of course I'm suffering, that person, you know, call me whatever they call you. So it's true, the world is a shitty place. People do harmful things to each other, to us, there is no doubt. Buddha's not arguing with that. But what he is saying is this very empowering point. Yes, but I can change. I can suffer less by changing myself. And this is what I get so powerfully from people in prison. I cannot tell you. I think we talked about this last time I was here. We're dealing with, we get like 200-300 letters a month now from so many people in prison. And we don't hear from the Martha Stewarts, believe me. You know? Really. You know, it's like, we hear from all the guys who are the worst, the maximum securities, the ex-gangsters, the junkies, the druggies, you know, we hear from the ones who've got really suffering lives. And we're basically a Dharma centre, you know. We're a Buddhist centre, Liberation Prison Project, but our people are in prison. And they're the ones they're the kind of the ones who would never even hear the word Buddhism normally. It's kind of interesting, actually. Who've had garbage lives, incredible suffering, are in horrible situations now. I mean, I was just talking this morning. The sentencing in this country, when I compare with Australia, for example, is just depressing. I mean, 30 years for the smallest thing is so common. And you go to these prisons. Most of them are guys who write to us. Kind of interestingly, don't know why. 98% of the letters we get are from men. For some reason, I don't know why. There's an enormous number of women in prison. But, it's like in these appalling situations with these long sentences, these young guys just did one or two things wrong. I've probably done worse things than some of these guys, and they got 30 years, if not life. So there they are, learning to accept their reality, learning to see there's no benefit in being angry, there's no benefit in resentment and bitterness, because it is destroying them. And that's the first one, about recognising the suffering of our own delusions, that itself is why we're suffering. Bad enough that Manuel punches me and my nose is bleeding, but my suffering is my anger, my fear, my resentment, my bitterness. And when you're in prison and you cannot open that gate, then you are forced onto your own mind. You either go insane or you're forced into yourself. That's what I'm seeing. Incredible. We often, because we have the illusion of being free, we don't really think we're suffering, But I'm sorry, you check with the relationship you're in right now and how horrible it is and how you feel paralysed by it and how you don't think you have any choices and you're obsessed with how that person should change and it's not my fault and poor me. We're like in prison, I know when the first guy who ever wrote to us 9 years ago, this young Mexican up in Pelican Bay, the top security prison in this state, right, where they have these security housing units 23 hours a day in these small cells with 10 books, the inside of a pen, the soft part, and a few photos and a television and, and earphones. And they're in there 23 hours a day, no windows, nothing. And then they have 1 hour in another cell, no windows or anything. And then many of them got life in there. And this guy, he's been there since he's 18, in prison since he's 12, like a gangster guy. 3 life sentences, not for killing anybody, just for a gang fight. And he would turn 21 and he'd become a Buddhist by then. And I asked Lama Zopa, my teacher, to send him a birthday card. So Rinpoche wrote him several cards, actually. And one of the things he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said to him, "Your prison is nothing in comparison with the inner prison of ordinary people, the prison of attachment, prison of pride, prison of depression." And this is the Buddha's deal, This is the distinctive one of Buddha's idea of suffering. We often would think, well, I'm not suffering, I'm not in prison, I'm not depressed. I'm not in prison, I'm not in a war zone. No one's beating me up at this moment. We think of the gross level. And the first noble truth, there are 3 kinds of suffering. There's the suffering of suffering, in-your-face suffering, the stuff that we all agree on. But we don't ever go past that one. The second kind is the one that I just talked about, as Lama Zopa is referring to, the subtler one coming from the mind, the mental suffering. We'll go to India, we'll see poverty, we think that's suffering. Tibetan Lamas come here, they see suffering, because it's the mental one. Now you guys know about this because it's in your face, right? Mainly coming from the outside world, right? Seeing you as a thing that you're not. So, but still, nevertheless, we don't often still think we're suffering. But the key one is learning to look into these unhappy emotions and seeing how they are the source of our pain. Yes, the world is racist and homophobic. No one can argue. But the ones in prison, the one I'm getting at, yes, those gates are there. Yes, they're in prison wrongly. Yes, it's a long sentence. No, you're not the creep that they think you are. But hey, what can I do about it? I remember reading in a yoga magazine about one woman. I didn't read it very much. I saw a couple of quotes. And it blew my mind. This is exactly the point I'm talking about. She was on death row somewhere and was innocent. She got out after 17 years. But she came to this conclusion. In the beginning, unbelievable rage, because she knew that what they were saying wasn't the truth, which is what we all experience when it's painful. But she slowly became to realise, she started to read books about yoga and meditation and stuff, that she said, I decided. Basically she realised she couldn't open those gates. She couldn't change the judge's mind, the prosecutor's mind, the jury's mind, everybody else's mind. That was clear. That was fixed in stone. But she finally realised what she could change was her own mind. And that's the one that I'm seeing many people in prison because it's in their face, They can change their mind. So she said, I decided I am not a prisoner, I am a monk. I am not in a cell, I'm in a cave. And she also, which I think is amazing, it shows her real self-respect, her dignity, she decided this practice was totally private. She didn't show it, No one knew what she was doing. That shows an amazing human being, actually. But that's what I'm getting, variations of this. I'm not making them all like God, they're not, they're regular humans. But because when you're really up against it, we can all see this, when you're really back against the wall, you either go crazy or you start to look inside. And that's the Buddhist one. That's a distinctive one. So it's until we really recognise we're suffering. This is why Buddhism talks about suffering. Until you know you're suffering, you won't bother going to the doctor, will you? Until you know you're suffering, especially at this level, you won't ever try to look at your mind. You know, because as long as you can keep getting the nice coffee, the nice this and the nice friend and the nice job and the nice that, which is alleviating your gross level of suffering, you're going to cop out and not even notice the subtle level. So it's only when we have painful stuff happening that all these guys in prison say it's their wake-up call, you know. It's been my wake-up call, they say. It's like their mantra, you know. The ones we know are seriously practicing in whatever level. And this is... got to go, huh? Sorry.
We're coming.
Oh my gosh,
to
it is. I'm so sorry.
And I've just
But some questions, maybe.
yes, and
can we
maybe
maybe
one or two questions. And would you be around after?
Oh, happy to stay.
Oh, great. Okay.
But
So
maybe
people-
is it okay we go a bit over time? Are you really strict about your clock?
Yeah.
You are.
No.
Oh.
Yes, we're not.
Oh, you are. You are strict about your clock.
I'm not strict about it, but.
Well, then who else? Put your hands up. Who's strict? Come on. So we've got to stop right now, do we?
You know, we.
Oh, okay. Well, just a few questions, if you want. Maybe you got none. So a few questions. I never got into talking about attachment yet. I'm sorry. Trying to go into the details of it. We never did. We'll have to leave
We'll
that
have you back for sure.
Okay.
This isn't the last.
So any questions? A couple of questions.
Will you come back soon in 5 years?
Yeah, I'm going to be in town June, August and September. So if you want me, I'm more than happy. We can do maybe a little series of dealing with the delusions.
Attachment.
Yeah, we will. Dealing with delusions or something we can have. I'm happy to do. Yes. Go on.
I loved your talk. It made me happy. So it
Oh, good.
took away suffering. So thank you. And I also loved what you said about Buddhists being a great psychologist.
Yes.
I just thought that was wonderful. I wanted to ask if you could maybe mention a few of the resource centers for learning more about Tibetan Buddhism here in the city.
Well, yeah, the centre... Okay, I'm the director of Liberation Prison Project. We share a big old Victorian on the corner of Oak and Webster with another Tibetan Dharma centre that I'm connected with as part of the same organisation, the foundation, he said. It's called Tse Ling. It's 399 Webster. And there's this lovely old Tibetan teacher there, monk, and there are Westerners who teach there. So that's one. The only one I know the address of is where I live, I'm afraid. I don't know any others. So it's Tse TSE, Chen Ling. Maybe we can write it down. 399 Webster. Okay. And they have classes 2 to 3, like Sunday mornings, 2 nights a week there are teachings, and then there are teachings from Westerners as well. Oh, but that's one anyway. I think there are definitely others in the city. Yeah. Someone else. There you go. No questions anyway. Yes.
Would you speak to the use of evil in the world as a weapon or something?
How do you mean the use of it?
Well, it seems to me it's used as a concept that isn't balanced in a lot of ways. And I don't know.
You mean other people use the idea of it to make you fearful, so we've got to go drop bombs on them? You mean that one? Well, okay, the Buddhist way of saying that really is that we've got all these trillions and trillions of consciousnesses called humans, let's say, and animals, all kinds. Buddha would say there are many kinds of beings in different forms. Let's just look at the human ones. There's a few billion human beings. We've all got a whole bunch of these different qualities in our minds, right? Some positive, some negative. And we can clearly see, even in our own lives, not to mention other out there are some people who seem to have more negative ones than positive. Possibly, you know. So then you could say that's where evil is. Evil is not some abstract thing that exists out there separate from beings, really. But there can be a collection of it, with a bunch of people all thinking the same way, and so they all drop bombs very well together, because you see my point? All think they all go shoot the other person. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's just the way Buddha would say, and so it's, okay, it's no time to talk about it now that we've past our time, but this is where the karmic one comes in, and Buddha's explanations of how come the suffering, and why this, and why were the people there, and why 6 million Jews got killed by the other millions who are called Nazis, and why, you understand my point. But in the end, evil and good is just in consciousnesses, you know, and that's why we suffer, and that's why we cause others to suffer. So it's not some abstract thing out there that sort of sounds fearful, which is all how we think, you know. You understand what I'm saying? It brings lots of fear, and it's just very superstitious. And that's delusional, Buddha would say, that a way of talking about it.
Ravina, why don't I suggest that it slows down, and then people could come and maybe form a little circle just for a brief time more?
If that's what you'd like, you do. I'll do what you want.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
sure
much.
Thing. Okay. Or we can just sit out there.
Or sit out there?
Yeah, just
okay.
Have a
Great,
coffee,
okay,
over a
so
cup
we'll
of tea.
continue the conversation.
Okay, can I sing a wee prayer to finish?
Oh, we'll do
May I do
that
that?
in just
Oh, I beg your pardon.
a
Okay.
moment. We'll have you do the dedication of merit at the end.
Okay.
We got this all,
You got it all down. Oh.
Way down.
You can tell, can't you?
Well, you can change. If you were to go to one of Lama Zopa's teachings, you'd all go crazy. You go there at 7, he starts at 9, he'll finish at 3 in the morning. So you've got to go with real flexible mind, I tell you. There's nothing wrong with systems. Systems are good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
We have time for brief announcements. Yes?
Yeah, a couple Sundays ago when we had our general meeting, we were looking for ideas where we could have more of song and a sense of knowing each other better. One of the ideas was GBF at the movies. So I take it upon myself to do a GBF at the movies night. I have flyers I'll hand outside. The movie I picked, The Wild Pears of Telegraph Hill, I heard is a great flick. And it's so I'm thinking Friday night, and I have flyers that describe the details here, or else my phone number's in the newsletter talking about this. You can call me, or else I'll announce it on the Yahoo site. But anyway, I think it would be a fun way for us to get to know each other a little better and to socialize and to see a nice movie. If you're interested, and please only take a flyer if you're interested, because I only have 3 flyers.
Great, thank you. I thought I saw Lee here.
Yes.
Do you want to announce it?
So there's a GBF potluck tonight at my place, and all of you are welcome. We'll spread you out if you all come. And there are flyers outside. It's 4.5 blocks up the hill on 17th Street in front of the Arco station. It's 4.5 blocks up from Castro and Market. It's generally not too difficult to park around there. And people are invited at 6:30, and the flyer says we'll eat at 7, but we'll eat whenever we eat.
Great, thank you. Yes?
My name is Don Weaver, and for those of you who don't, I am the coordinator of outreach to business for the fellowship. And I have 40 letters,
Wonderful. Wow.
which we have a month.
Amazing.
And so, keeping with our custom, I'm hoping that we'll have a mail opening party. So that's what we do.
Fantastic.
Once a month.
Brilliant.
A number of people sit down, we all read the letters.
So good.
And then figure out how we're going to respond.
Well, may I just say to you that we are very, very happy to support you with books. We've got like a stock of like 280 titles, and we like to be generous with books. So you, absolutely, any time.
I have referred people to you.
Good.
Never directly contacted.
Good.
And
All right.
we cooperate with us.
Yes.
I have met Ms. Bodie.
Beatty, Tova. That's right. That's right. She used to work at the AIDS hospice.
I have met her.
That's right.
So I'm just saying, anyway.
Brilliant. That's wonderful.
We'll have a little group
Fantastic.
that will meet, maybe about 12, 15, 12, 20, hopefully, and we'll be able to divide this up so we can share
Great.
responsibilities.
Very good.
I do want to say that we send through the prisoners very often when they want to see what we're about or pass newsletters. I have copies of the 2 speeches.
Oh, yeah.
5 years ago.
Oh, gosh.
I'll bring next week, I think.
Okay.
It's called Prison Dialogue.
Oh, I remember it now. I think I remember
I
that.
sent you one.
You did. I remember now. I do. You did. I remember. That's it. Yes. Good. Okay. I'm glad to be helpful.
Okay. Now, the other thing I just wanted to mention, the facilitators open up at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're invited to come anytime after 10. We had so many people arriving just after, actually, 10:30 today. If we could try and get, like, maybe the bulk of us here by 10:15, it's a nice time to kind of settle in anyway. So, hope I don't sound too school alarmish for that. And the other thing is we do have to keep this door open. I know it's kind of a bother, but the center says that since we have the front door unlocked, we need to have it open. Okay, let's all stand and form a shape. Can you do the dedication of marriage?
Oh, yes. Me, you mean?
Yes.
Say something. Okay. All right. Where are we? So I'm going to sing a prayer in Tibetan, but sort of what it's saying, very loosely, it's saying that here we've all been, hour together, hour and a half, in the last hour anyway, listening, each of us listening, thinking in our own ways. And so each of these thoughts has been a seed we've planted. Every thought really counts, you know. This is what karma means, action, a seed we've planted. So maybe this prayer is saying, may these seeds ripen as quickly as possible in the development of our own amazing potential for the sake of every living being. And the second little prayer just makes the aspiration that compassion grow and grow. I'll just sing in Tibetan. Kewaji nyu du dak Lama sangye dru gyurne drowa chi kyang malupa dei sala Shok Jangchob Semchog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchik Ke Panyam Pa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Pelba Shok. Okay, thanks everybody very much. Happy to be here. See all you lovely gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.